always taking action for you.
We begin with breaking news tonight. Families are outraged. A cancer doctor accused of fraud will soon be set free on bond. Just moments ago, a judge laid out the conditions for Dr. Fareed Fata, who's accused of misdiagnosing patients and giving unnecessary treatments.
7 Action News broke this story earlier this week, and we've been following it every step of the way. Jim Kirchner has just learned the new details in the judge's order. He's live downtown at federal court this afternoon. Jim, what can you tell us?
Jeff, for right now, Dr. Fata is going nowhere. He's still being held in custody. That's because the magistrate's ruling is now being appealed to a federal district judge. That hearing about to get underway behind me here on the 8th floor. Take a look at the conditions that the magistrate did impose that would have allowed the doctor to get out. The magistrate calling this a close call. He would have been on a 24-hour home incarceration. He couldn't leave his home. There would be a tether or some kind of monitoring system to ensure that. He was to have no contact with his clinics, with his patients, with his 60 employees. He could not consult on any care. He could not administer any medications. There would have been a cash bond to be determined, and there was quite a dispute that lasted over an hour how much money this doctor actually has. The government argued he had access to some $14 million, but his defense attorney said that figure was much lower, about $1.5 million. The government also argued that he has billed Medicare for $150 million in services for which he has collected $62 million, and the government arguing that's why he was a flight risk, because he had access to all of that cash. But the defense attorney surrendered his passport. The magistrate, David Grant, said he could be released, but now it is under an immediate appeal here on the 8th floor with federal district judge David Larson. He is expected to rule this afternoon. Still a very fluid situation here downtown. Jeff, Joanne?
Jim, set the scene for us in that courtroom today. There were family members who they say have been affected by this doctor, correct?
Yeah, we saw a very rare situation where this judge allowed victim impact statements for this detention hearing. And 5 people did speak to the judge saying they had family members who were treated with what they believe was improper care. Some of them died as a result of that. Very emotional. They told the judge they do not want him released. They want him to be held accountable. But the defense attorney argued that this is a family man. He has ties to Lebanon, but he owns no property there. His family has a house. He's only traveled there once in the last 10 years. He's a family man with a wife who was in court and 3 kids. The defense attorney says they're ages 10, 11, and 13, and his life is here. So we have a magistrate who says this doctor can be released, but it's now on an emergency immediate appeal.
Jim, just one more question before you go. As those family members were talking today, any reaction from the doctor? Could you read anything in the expression on his face?
The only time the doctor spoke was when he talked about a foundation that was set up by one of the family members he treated. He said it was a foundation to raise money for social workers to work with patients and family members of cancer patients. That's the only time the doctor spoke, but he was passionate about that and about his mission as an oncologist and a hematologist. Very limited, of course, in what he can say because he's facing very serious charges. And another point on that note, the government said we're just starting to build our case. We're getting a ton of phone calls for more patients and staff members of this doctor. They pointed out at one time that one of the employees of the doctor was fired because they suspected this employee was working with the government. Right now, the charges he faces could put him in prison for up to 20 years, but the government says if we can show, as we continue to build our case, that this doctor and his mistreatment killed a patient, they could go for a life sentence.
Thank you for
Jim.
the update.
Yeah,
Jim.
let us know if there's going to be a ruling on that appeal, Jim. And as he mentioned, we are still monitoring this very important story for the community. We are keeping on top of this to let you know exactly what is going on in this case. We'll have much more coming up at 7 Action News and WXYZ.com, our webpage.